Robert Meyer Burnett.
I've heard it said before, like, it was a very smart man named Robert Meyer Burnett who said the currency of our current age is authenticity. And it's so true.
I was off duty, sitting in my buddy Barney Ross's Speak at Van Buren in Plymouth, drinking rum out of a coffee cup when two guys shouldered in, looking like hoodlums. I was almost right. It was Mayor Cermak's bagman bodyguards, Harry Lang and Harry Miller, the two Harrys. His Honor's two-man hoodlum squad, heavy set and as anonymous as a couple gorillas at Lincoln Park Zoo, only uncaged.
Hiya, Red. Heard you hung out here.
Red wasn't my name. Heller was. Nathan Heller. Nate to my friends, who these two definitely were not. Miller was cleaning the fog off his Coke bottle glasses. I knew him a little. Lang too. We were all Maxwell Street boys. They were just older, and fatter, and even more dishonest.
Greetings, imagination connoisseurs. Once again, it is I, your Duke of Dope Discourse, your master of fun and wonder, your viceroy of verisimilitude, your sommelier of sci-fi and cinema. Oops. Your evangelist of the imagination, and, of course, the perhaps never-to-be-defined existential Mr. Rogers. That's right, me, Robert Meyer Burnett, and once again, I'm Rob casting at you. You, imagination connoisseurs, you members of this, the Post-Geek Singularity community. Ooh, it's a hot one here in the Robservatory. That was a little taste, by the way. You just heard a taste of the introductory narration, Nathan Heller's narration, from the very beginning of True Noir. Now, there's no sound effects or anything like that, and I just obviously put the raw narration underneath the music, but you're the first to ever hear it. First ever. There's stuff sprinkled in that narration, too. I just kind of put it all together. It's just a quick edit job. I was recording our main character, Nathan Heller, all week, and let me tell you, it's very, very exciting. We're $6,000 away from our Kickstarter goal, so if you want to support True Noir, the assassination of Anton Cermak from the Nathan Heller casebooks, please go to Kickstarter right now, truenoir.co, and help us out. Help us cross that finish line. There are 6 days. God created the earth in 6 days. On the 7th day, he rested. And if you help me cross that Kickstarter line, I can rest on the 7th day. Actually, I can't, because I'll still be working on True Noir. And for those of you who might be in New York for the New York City Comic Con, if you were at our Comic Con panel at San Diego, you know we put on a good panel. We give good panel. And I promise you, we're going to give good panel at NYCC too. It's going to be a different panel. There's going to be people on that panel you haven't seen before. There's going to be people, our main character, Nathan Heller, is going to be on that panel. So, hey, what can I say? Come visit us on the 18th. Maybe, I don't know when, there's something like that. But it's from the 17th to the 20th. So come check us out at the New York City Comic Con sometime during that time. I don't know when the panel is, to be honest, but we'll find out. We'll be there. And I hope we're there. I mean, we'll be there. I hope there's a panel. I don't know. I hope we do a lot of things at the New York City Comic Con. We shall see. But come join us, and I promise you, True Noir, the assassination of Anton Cermak. If you like audio dramas, wait till you hear this one. Anyway, this is going to be kind of a different. I'm not going to necessarily talk about movies. I'm going to talk about, go figure, myself, my career, hopes, dreams, all those things. But first, I would like to start with a letter. That's right, a letter from our own Major Chai Chai. She's actually, I don't know if she's an actual major. I guess maybe she is. That's her call sign. I don't know. Major Chai Chai. I know she's in the service. Was she a major? Maybe I'm supposed to know that. Major Chai Chai says, hello, Robert. This Labor Day weekend, I watched Seconds, John Frankenheimer's Seconds, Andrei Tarkovsky's Stalker, and William Friedkin's To Live and Die in L.A. My thoughts on each one follows. Seconds, you mentioned on Robservations 987 when I asked for a recommendation in a super chat. This movie unsettled me, but in a good way, like watching an extended episode of The Twilight Zone or The Outer Limits. I also enjoyed Rock Hudson's performance. It was nice to watch him in a role other than a romantic comedy with Doris Day or in Giant or in Ice Station Zebra. Salome Jens was gorgeous too. She played the founder in Deep Space Nine, but she was hot. Seconds is it's one of my favorite science fiction films. And I'll tell you something, always food for thought. Always food for thought. To Live and Die in L.A., I watched because you always mention it. I figured I better view it to understand why the hell you keep talking about it. I think I understand why you like it. Personally, I'm mixed on this movie. I thought the opening scene in the hotel was extraneous, and the movie could have started with the jump from the bridge. The last third dragged for me. What? However, I love the chase scene on the freeway, and the counterfeiting process fascinated me. Yeah, they got in a lot of trouble for that. As I thought about the movie afterward, I came to appreciate the story's ironic point that the only honest, or dare I write, authentic person in the movie was Eric Masters, Willem Dafoe's character, the counterfeiter, the villain. Everyone else had a false front and or deluded themselves about their actions, in particular, William Peterson's Secret Service agent Richard Chance. Boy, you got it. You got this movie, Major Chai Chai. As a matter of fact, the documentary on the physical media is called Counterfeit World. And there's a reason for that. You understood. Finally, I watched Stalker. Since you keep saying that to most people, this film would be like watching paint drying. I rather liked Solaris. I figured I would give Stalker a try. By the way, both were directed by Andrei Tarkovsky. For an almost 3-hour movie, I don't know how Tarkovsky was able to keep me engaged with such an esoteric movie with minimal effects. I think having read some Russian literature helped with appreciating this movie. I liked it better than Solaris. Wow. It's The Wizard of Oz diffracted and inverted through the Russian fatalist lens. I like you more and more. I'm going to have to watch it again to make sure I caught all the nuance in the film. Of these 3 movies, this is the one I want to watch again the most. Bravo to you. You are a true imagination connoisseur. Thanks again for expanding my cinema horizons. Yours truly, Major Chai Chai. Well, thank you for that. And thank you also for being a great supporter of True Noir, the assassination of Anton Cermak. I have to tell you, we're finally finishing it up. We're in the middle of recording our lead actor, but we've got 2 actors after that, and then we're done. And we have scored the first 5 episodes. We have the music score. We now have almost 2.5 hours of original music. And who has 2.5 hours of original score on an audio drama? We do. And you can go listen to the EP, the True Noir EP. It's 6 tracks of Alexander Bornstein's score. You can go check that out. It's also on my Instagram page if you want to look at it and listen to. It's about 15 minutes, and I think the music itself speaks for the quality of the audio drama. I couldn't be happier with how it's going. Now, I didn't get to talk about this thing that happened. I mean, look, it's funny. People always talk about doing clickbait shows. Well, on this particular show, if I'm not talking about Star Wars, Star Trek, or Marvel, I'm lucky if I get lots of views at all. But that's okay. And some people get mad if I don't get to the point. Like, why did it take you a half an hour to get the actual review of the thing that I wanted to hear? Look, this show has been going on for 988 episodes. If you don't understand by now, it's Robservations, not Alien Romulus review. But I love all of you, and of course, for you members, there is a member call tomorrow at 11. Look forward to seeing you. It's probably going to be another 105 or 110 degrees, which means it's 120 degrees in the Robservatory. Yeah, man, but it's a dry heat. But anyway, so, yeah, I just talk about stuff. But I wanted to talk about sort of my career, hopes and dreams, and why I got into this business and how it started and how it's going. And I should say, I got to take you all the way back to when it's hard to explain to people that weren't there, because as many people say, I'm an old man yelling at clouds. But in terms of genre and fandom in general, one of the things that I've always said that the demarcation point for fandom is Star Wars, because Star Wars was when fandom went populist. It was the first time real, I mean, in the 70s there was genre cinema. The Exorcist was very popular. I would say The Godfather was genre cinema, and it elevated genre. Jaws elevated genre. And Star Wars elevated the science fiction fantasy genre to a level it had never been at before. And pre-Star Wars, there just wasn't very many great movies, as I've said before many times. There weren't that many great science fiction movies, and most science fiction fandom was literary based, because some of, I think, the greatest literature of the 20th century was science fiction. And everybody could probably, if I said, okay, name the 10 biggest science fiction novels of the 20th century, you could probably all say them. Whether you wanted to throw out Dune, whether you wanted to throw out Stranger in a Strange Land, or, take your pick. And we're talking mid-century science fiction. But you could probably pretty much know all the books. Off the top of your head, you might not know you know them, but you probably could say them. Same is true for science fiction movies. Before Star Wars, there's like the same 10 movies that everybody would cite. That was, and at the top of that list was 2001, Planet of the Apes, Forbidden Planet, Day the Earth Stood Still, maybe War of the Worlds, Metropolis. It was not a big list. And post-Star Wars, there was a renaissance. Look, I love all the dystopian films of the 70s, literary adaptations like A Boy and His Dog. Actually, Rollerball was an adaptation of a short story. Clockwork Orange was another. It's considered science fiction about a dystopian future. But these things were not. They didn't necessarily change culture, and they certainly didn't become a child's rite of passage the way Star Wars did. So for me, I was at that sweet spot where being born, believe it or not, this is going to really date me. People are going to freak out when I tell you this. I was born in 1967, the year that the James Bond movie You Only Live Twice came out. So that's how old I am. People are like going, really? I know, right? But the important thing is, so when I was a child in 1972, when I was 5 years old, Star Trek went into strip syndication, and yes, we will be celebrating. So I know Star Trek Day is technically today because The Man Trap aired in Canada, but Star Trek Day is September 8th. It always has been, it always will be. Don't try and turn it into a May the 4th be with you bullshit. No. Star Wars Day is May 25th. It always has been. It always will be. Somebody comes up with a May the 4th. I'm like, fuck you. Fuck you. Let's take Star Wars Day back to May 25th where it belongs. But anyway, so I was at the sweet spot where Star Trek goes into syndication. We got the animated series, the Planet of the Apes animated show, the live-action TV show. Logan's Run came out in 76. Jaws came out in 75. So my entire childhood was sort of supercharged. And because I was interested in movies, it was on an uphill curve. And when I became really interested in film, my mom, I was lucky. I was 9 years old. My mom took me to see Logan's Run opening night. It was mind-blowing. And I was there, and I've said it a million times on the show, but post-Star Wars, science fiction, fantasy, and horror, and also the horror genre, post-Exorcist, there was a lot of Exorcist ripoffs, but, in terms of big studio horror projects, it was tough. You got things like The Omen, and there were other things that came out post-Exorcist, but not a lot of... There was horror films, but I don't think you could say The Sentinel, while interesting... it doesn't have... People are going, The Sentinel? See? That was the problem. Big budget horror, it was the low budget indie filmmakers that made horror explode. In the latter half of the 70s, of course, you had people like John Carpenter doing Halloween. You had Don Coscarelli doing Phantasm. You had all the Sean Cunningham doing Friday the 13th. And then everything post-Star Wars, in between Star Wars and Empire, we got Alien, which changed things. Very influential movie. And then, of course, the summer of 82 brought us Blade Runner, Poltergeist, Tron, The Thing, E.T., Megaforce, starring Barry Bostwick, who is in True Noir playing FDR, just so you know. The Road Warrior came out in America. Mad Max 2 came out in America the summer of 1982. And then post that, science fiction, fantasy, and horror became big business. It was on the upslope in the 70s, but by the time the 80s arrived, and indie horror was doing big business. Even something that came out from Charlie Band, like Reanimator. Jeffrey Combs, also in True Noir, the assassination of Anton Cermak, was making money. So for me, I knew that I wanted to work in the entertainment business. I wanted to work in the film industry. I knew, and another thing that happened that was really, really important is the home video explosion, both cable, HBO, and Showtime, and VCRs. And of course, VCRs there was 3/4 inch decks, but they were way out of reach for most people. And then in the late 70s and early 80s, there were VHS and Betamaxes, but they were still pretty expensive. Beta lost the format war, even though Beta was a better format, because Sony would not license out their technology. Matsushita, who owned VHS, would license it out to anybody. That's why VHS won, even though Beta was a superior format. But that turned me into a movie fan. The combination of we couldn't even get cable. We had a giant dish on our roof to get Showtime. Thank you, Mom and Dad, for getting that for me. So I had Showtime and I had a VCR. So starting in 1980, when I was 13, I was a complete fanatic, going to the Seattle Film Festival, taking the bus everywhere, because thank you to my friend Jeff Swafford, who taught me Seattle had a great metro bus system, and starting when we were 10 years old, parents today would never let them do this, but we went all over the city. I knew where every movie theater was. So I got to live through this period of time watching all of this stuff explode. And at the same time, music was exploding, the music of the 80s, and how it was very fused to film. So a lot of the time, hit songs were coming out of movies, the Simple Minds' Don't You Forget About Me, from things like The Breakfast Club, or even, as I've talked about, my beloved The Hunger, seeing Bauhaus open The Hunger, oh my God. And then you had, everything from Suburbia and Repo Man bringing great punk tunes to the world. And it was a very heady time, and it was full of promise. And never when I was, going through junior high school and high school and into college, I was completely fueled by movies. Going to film festivals, all pop culture, indeed. All pop culture. And going to the Seattle Film Festival, and I had my friend Taylor White, who was here in California, who was literally clipping me stuff out of the trades. And he would send me, it seemed like every week, he would send me envelopes of important articles about the film business that he would clip for me. And that was sort of the latter half of high school and into college. He would clip things for me that he thought I should know about the business of Hollywood, and that's when I started really getting into reading the trades and studying things. You had Premiere Magazine had come out, Entertainment Weekly started a little later, but it was a time where, as a youth, the promise of what could be done grew. And the fact that science fiction, fantasy, and horror, my genre, they weren't necessarily my favorite movies, but it was certainly my genre. I would go see every science fiction, fantasy, and horror film that came out. It didn't matter whether it was Yor, the Hunter from the Future, or Krull. Krull was a big budget movie. Yor was not so good, but I'd go see it. We'd go see everything. And it wouldn't matter if we're seeing an American cut down of the Beyond Seven Doors of Death, or whether we're going, you could sneak into Seven Doors of Death after you snuck into Dress to Kill at the Crossroads Cinema. You could do all these things. But during this time, I started dreaming about getting into the film business and what I would make. And it was like Kubrick, it was all books and comics, but mostly novels. And a lot of it, I read a lot of genre fiction, a lot of the British horror writers. I've talked about them before. Anything with extreme sex and violence, James Herbert's early books, Graham Masterton's early books, Brian Lumley's, the Necroscope series. I would read Stephen King, Dean Koontz, Peter Straub. Why hasn't anyone made Peter Straub Shadowland? Why haven't you done that? But anyway, so I started to pick things out, and I had a shelf of stuff that I wanted to make into movies. And when I moved to LA, believe it or not, in 1988, I had 500 books that I was one day I'm going to see if I can make these. Most of them have been made, or are so wrapped up in development hell because people have been trying to make them that they'll never get made. There's too much money against them. And so it was in a way, when I got to Los Angeles and I finished up at film school, and then the first job that I ever had, as you all know, was being the art department production assistant on Texas Chainsaw Massacre 3. And it was interesting because one night, we shot mostly at nights, I met Mike DeLuca, who now runs Warner Brothers. And Mike DeLuca he wasn't an intern. I don't know if he was a creative executive. I don't know if he was an executive yet. But I met him on the set of, we actually in the production office of Leatherface, like in the middle of the night. And we actually had a conversation about James Bond movies. And to be fair, he was a little standoffish because he was an executive and I was a PA. Why wouldn't he be? But we had a good conversation. And I liked him because he knew his shit. It was like, oh, this guy, I hope every executive is like Mike DeLuca. They're not. but at the time, I was impressed by him because he was young and he knew a lot of stuff about movies. And he went on to, believe it or not, Mike DeLuca, with Pam Abdi, runs Warner Brothers now. Mike DeLuca, lest we not forget, wrote the screenplay for John Carpenter's In the Mouth of Madness. And I know I've heard Mike DeLuca wasn't totally happy with what John Carpenter did with that movie. I don't know if that's true or not, but I liked it. I liked In the Mouth of Madness. I thought it was great. I do read Sutter Kane. But anyway, so I started to meet people in the business. And it became both exciting and disheartening. Because what would happen is you would see a lot of, the problem that I had was, on one hand, I was a fanboy. I love these movies. I knew a lot about these movies. But knowing a lot about movies is not necessarily the best thing in the world when you're trying to make movies. And a lot of people, oh, you know so much about Star Trek. You should go work on Star... No, I've never worked in TV. If they put me in a writer's room, I would get thrown out the first day. Somebody would call the Writers Guild. They'd report me to HR. I'd be gone. The thing about the movie business is it takes a lot of different skill sets to make it in the movie business. First of all, you do need a lot of luck. And then you also have to kind of stay in your lane. And the thing is, since lots of money is being spent, if you intend to become a creator, a movie maker, a writer, director, or whatever, you have to prove yourself. And I had a lot of great experience in the 90s. I was editing low-budget features and post-supervising them. I worked in promotions. I made trailers for films. I worked at both CAA and William Morris as a reader. I wasn't a particularly good reader. I was slow because I would actually read all the scripts. I did get to work at Warner Brothers for Senior Vice President Bill Young, who was the head of physical production. I learned an incredible amount back then. But you also had to have a lot of luck. And there were times when I made decisions that were not probably the best decisions in the world. For instance, I was a development executive for a director. I was working on a film, a studio movie, and this director quit. He had made a terrific indie film that Miramax released, and he quit a Go studio movie 6 weeks before principal photography. Now, I was the producer's assistant on this movie, and when my time on the film was up, I really liked this director because I really liked his movie. And he put me to work as his development executive. And we were looking for new projects to make. And I thought for sure, because he had made this low-budget indie film that I really admired, I thought it was really terrific. It had such humanity and emotion, and it was a quiet movie, but it was really, really good. What I didn't know at the time, and the indication, anybody who wants to make movies, and if you have a Go studio movie, and by the way, the movie that he was replaced, he quit the film 6 weeks before principal, and I went to work for him after that. Shouldn't have done that in retrospect, but so I did though, because I figured, okay, of course he's going to go make a movie. What I didn't understand is even people that have made movies don't necessarily, this seems counterintuitive, don't necessarily want to do it again. Or, to me, I'm like, my attitude has always been, as Rob G, my friend Rob G has taught me, the whole idea of wouldn't it be cool if, that has always been I've never worried about failure. I've never been insecure about making things. I'm like, hey, let's go do this. I always know that whatever I'm going to go do, especially when you need with other people, it'll be good to great. Sometimes might be genius and go over the top, but it'll be good to great if you're working with the right people and you go make it. And I'm the person I'm like the cheerleader. Hey, everybody, let's go do this project. Kind of like what I'm doing on True Noir right now. And I'll get everybody to contribute and find people that are good. I know what you can do. I know what you can do. I know what you can do. The score for True Noir is a perfect example. Listen to Alex Bornstein's score. So I go to work for this director and who'd made this great movie. And I figured, oh, okay. He put me in charge of his development. I was his development executive. I still have a card that says that. And what we did was we started, and I was in charge of doing this, we had screenings of his movie around town, specifically for writers. And we cast out, and so you guys know when this was, it was like 30 years ago. And it was 1993. And so I would organize, wherever I went, I would meet writers in bars or whatever. I'm like, hey, do you have scripts to submit these scripts, and then I would put together these screenings, and we would show his movie in a screening room to usually 50, 100 writers, new writers, and then I would have meetings, and I would read scripts, and I was supposed to find movies for this director to make that we were going to make, and I was going to produce with him. During that time, this director was offered 2 other live-action studio movies. Both of them were Disney. Both of them became hits. And both of them he turned down. He was offered the directing job, and he turned them down. Needless to say, I was dismayed by this because, if you're not very established and you quit your last studio job, the fact that studios are still offering you movies, you don't not take them. And both of these movies had great scripts. Both were fun, but they weren't great enough for him. So, again, this was dismaying to me. And then after all the year I worked for him, and I finally found a script that we should make. I was like, this is it, man. This is the script we were going to make. And the script was called Turn and Burn, which is a waitress term. And it was a indie script, and it was all about the lives of these young people who had come to Hollywood, and they were working like at a Mel's Diner. They were working at a Hollywood diner, and it was all about their lives. It wasn't like Come Back to the Five and Dime, Jimmy Dean. But it was a great indie script, could be done for a price, not expensive in terms of locations, and it was, I thought, a terrific script. I'm like, this is the script that you want to make. And it was written by a woman named Connie Burge. And I was like, this script, man, by the way, it's never been made. But we were going to make it. And I thought for sure, because we told her we're going to make this script absolutely 100%. And we didn't make it. Connie Burge went on to create Charmed. So she's doing okay. I haven't talked to her or seen her. I've never seen her since. I've often wanted to run into her at some point and be like, hey, remember that script? And the thing was, I was so frustrated. And then, I didn't have a lot of money. I wasn't getting paid a lot of money, but I was putting all of my hopes and dreams into this job. And I was in charge of finding material. And I found the script. I'm like, this is it, man. This is doable. We can cast it with a bunch of beautiful girls, or maybe not so beautiful girls, depending on which characters it was going to be. And it had great pathos. It had great characters. It was funny. It was warm. It had the same humanity that this director's first movie for Miramax had in it. I figured, hey, we could even, at the time, make it for Miramax. It was the explosion of indie films. We were between Reservoir Dogs and Pulp Fiction. I want to say maybe Clerks had come out, but it was the indie film explosion. It was the perfect time to make this movie. The perfect time. And so I'm working with this director for like a year, and one day, and I had my business card said creative executive on it. And one day, this director was on the phone after like a year and called me his assistant. And, I'd sacrificed a lot to do this job because I believed in him. I believed in him. And when he called me his assistant, something in me snapped. And I got pissed. And I quit after a year because I realized he's never going to make a movie. He's scared to do it. For whatever reason, he turned down 2 studio movies. He quit a studio movie that I was working on as the producer's assistant. And then he turned down 2 other studio pictures that were offered to him that both were made and turned out great. So that's 3 movies that he could have made and he didn't make. And then the movie that I spent a year trying to find for him to make didn't do that either. And the writer went on and created Charmed. So I knew that my taste was great. I knew that if he had listened to me, maybe I would have been a producer on a movie a lot sooner than I ended up being a producer on my first movie. The first time I ever I have an associate producer on the James Gunn penned The Specials, and I did direct Free Enterprise, but I don't have a producer's credit on it. The first time I was actually made a producer on a movie was when we purchased the script that became Agent Cody Banks. So that was in 2003. That was 10 years. 10 years after where I could have been. And that was on me. That was a mistake that I make, because hope springs eternal. I believe, man. I believe in people, but you know what? I thought that everybody wanted to make movies. It wasn't about me. It was about the movies that we were going to make. I wanted to be a part of the tapestry of what I had grown up loving, what meant so much to me. It's never been about my ego. It's been about the project. I've always told people the work is the locomotive that pulls your caboose down the tracks. And if you want to do a big whistle stop tour and stand on the back of the caboose and wave and stop at every town and meet girls, that's great. Do that. Do whatever you want. But if the work's good, then you got that locomotive that's always going to take you down those tracks. No one can take the work away from you. One of the things about Hollywood is everyone's getting in the way of the work. I spent half my career arguing with people about things that might never happen. When you're making a deal for Hollywood, you're negotiating deal points that might never occur. Probably won't. But they have to all be put in the deal now because you never know. Maybe your movie might become a TV series someday. Woohoo! So I get it. You got to be taken care of. But man, Hollywood's a place where dreams go to die. Now, sometimes you get lucky. 1 in 1,000, you get lucky. And for me, like I said, I'm lucky in that I was a fanboy. And if something didn't work out, hell, I'll go work at a makeup effects house and have a blast. Like when I worked for Tony Gardner's studio, one summer I'm working on Army of Darkness, Mick Garris's Sleepwalkers, I'm painting Dick Durock's facial appliances for the Swamp Thing TV show. I'm like, hell yeah. My friend Taylor White, who sent me those Variety articles, got me that job at Tony Gardner's Altarian Studios. And I'll tell you something. That was when makeup effects were they were booming, and there was no more. If you wanted to walk into an inspiring place, a makeup effects studio in the mid-'90s, early to mid-'90s, was one of the best places to go. And all those guys knew each other. They jumped from studio to studio. You'd walk in there every morning. I'm watching these incredibly talented people, pulling foam masks out and painting. It was amazing. I loved it. And so that was just as much fun as trying to get a movie produced with a director who was never going to make a movie. But I didn't understand that. I didn't understand, why wouldn't you want to make a movie? And these 2 movies that got made, they actually, when they came out, they were all good and people liked them. They weren't huge successes, but they both made money. One had a sequel made, and to this day, that movie has a legacy that continues on. And I didn't understand, why did this director not want to do this? And at the same time, I'm collecting books, and I'm like, I want to make this into a movie. I want to make this into a movie. I want to make this into a movie. I would do things like when I was working at Warner Brothers, I've told the story about tracking down the rights to the TV movie Don't Be Afraid of the Dark. And I went looking for it, calling the agent. I even talked to the writer of the original Don't Be Afraid of the Dark. And I was just a PA. I was a management trainee at Warner Brothers, but I worked at Warner Brothers. I had an office at Warner Brothers, so I could send things out on Warner Brothers stationery. And I was really serious about trying to get the rights to Don't Be Afraid of the Dark. And then they went away. Then I couldn't get anybody on the phone because who the fuck was I? Morgan and James Wong and Glenn Morgan, of course, X-Files, they ended up getting the rights. Why would? Because once you call and try to get the rights for something, if you're a nobody and you're calling a big agency, then the big agency is like, oh, somebody wants it. You're out. You're cut. You're gone. And the agents will start sending it out to people, even though nobody remembered at the time, Don't Be Afraid of the Dark. I did. I'm like, I'm going to get the rights to Don't Be Afraid of the Dark. And I did try. But by doing so, the irony is by me going after those rights, that means it triggered something, and that means I'm gone. Bye-bye, kid. And then they go out, or even Morgan and Wong, for whatever reason, decide, because they saw the movie when they were kids too, and they decided to get it. For whatever, I'm not saying that it was me that caused those rights to go away, but when it's what happened in Hollywood, a lot of people that were my age, contemporaries of mine, started to gain success, and we all like the same shit. So what happened is all the things that I wanted to get made into movies, other people did too. I was not an island of one on this. All the people that wanted to get into the business that were my age, that were transformed by Star Wars and The Exorcist and Logan's Run and Jaws and Rollerball and whatever, and the things before that, we all came to Hollywood, the people that were motivated, and we were all influenced by the same shit. The explosion of 80s comic books, the comic book renaissance, the direct sale market, the music of the 80s, very influential. All of us that love the same shit came to Hollywood. So all those things that I put aside on my books, on my bookshelves, I'm like, I want to make these. A lot of other people had the same idea because they were good. And if you were paying attention, like the same thing was true. There's like, obviously Stephen King quickly became out of reach. I mean, Stephen King was first adapted, believe it or not. The first Stephen King adaptation, come on, people, name it right now. 1975, Carrie, Brian De Palma. Stephen King, out of the gate, became almost a household name. I mean, the first Stephen King book I read was Night Shift, and then I went backwards and read The Shining and Salem's Lot and Carrie, and Night Shift was a book of short stories, obviously. But then, even Clive Barker coming on the scene with the Books of Blood, and then Clive Barker becoming a director in '87 with Hellraiser. So all this stuff. So it wasn't surprising. Even to this day, I'm still seeing things that were on that shelf getting made. Like Swan Song, Robert McCammon's Swan Song. We'll see if it gets made. But, same people, especially in the horror community, like all the same shit. There's still some things I'm holding out hope for that maybe won't get made. And even though I get older, I still try and make stuff. But that said, there was news that dropped last week that I was busy working on True Noir, which, by the way, very happy to be in business with Max Allan Collins. Doing this True Noir, I can honestly tell you, it's something that I've pretty much controlled. I got Max Allan Collins to write the script. You heard a little taste of the opening narration without anything, it hasn't been affected or anything like that. There's no sound effects in it. But it's something that it'll be in the purest sense an example of my creative ability on a number of different levels. So I'm really excited. That's uncompromised. I don't think I've ever made anything that was uncompromised except this. And I'm really excited about it. And if you think it sucks, it's all my fault. I will accept the responsibility. But I think it's going to be one of the best things I've worked on. Now, as I've gotten older, there's still things that come out that I've loved, that I put away, that I like. And one of those things, you all know that I read a lot. And but I'm very specific about what I read. Like, for whatever reason, it has to have something that piques my interest in, especially genre stuff. And that gets harder and harder because the great genre writers nowadays, everything are variations on themes. There's very little. There's sometimes some things you can find that are great, but there's very little genre fiction that is, in my mind, interesting enough that I want to pick it up and read it. And look, I love trashy genre fiction. I love trashy horror novels. We don't get many trashy horror novels anymore. Not with sex and violence. We do get some, and I like to get them. I still look. I just don't know if you can get them made into movies these days. It's really interesting. It seems like a lot of American horror is a little moribund. It's all kind of similar. But that's okay. But there's a series of books that quickly became one of my favorite series of books ever in terms of horror and science fiction. And I've talked about this before. And the series of books is Jonathan Mayberry's Joe Ledger series. And I want to say the first book in this series came out in 2009. And it's called Patient Zero. And the premise of these books is, first of all, take all your horror tropes, zombies, Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, vampires, aliens, crazy AI, even Lovecraftian, even Cthulhu. Take all of those things, and what if you could take all of those things? I mean, AI already is pretty real, but what if you were able to take all of these things and bring them into the real world and get rid of the supernatural elements of them? You know, I mean, with zombies and stuff, they've done it with like the rage virus and 28 Days Later, or the sadness or something, but they took all of these horror tropes and put them in the real world, get rid of the supernatural elements, and then they become a problem. And what if there was a division of the government that a very shadowy area, a shadowy group in the government that had all this bleeding edge technology that would go after whatever these threats are. And in this series of books, they would have Bond-level villains, and then they would have groups of villains and secret societies and all kinds of things. The Illuminati, the clandestine nature of all these things. And Joe Ledger is a guy that is a cop that is recruited into the DMS, the Department of Military Science. That's the division of the government that goes after these threats. And it's a combination of James Bond, Tom Clancy, well, Ian Fleming's James Bond, Tom Clancy's Jack Ryan, and the X-Files. And it's globe-trotting. The stakes are always huge. And the books are wildly entertaining. And it was right up my alley. And I remember reading the first book, Patient Zero. And I'm like, when I read this book, I'm like, this fucking book rips. And I'm like, we gotta, and it became one of those things like, I want to turn this into a TV series. And even when I was reading these books at the time, I'm like, the only way to do this, and there was no way, no one would do this on TV in 2009. I was like, the only way to do this is each season, you have to adapt a book a season. Well, now, whether it's Harlan Coben or whether it's, Jack Reacher, Lee Child's, the Jack Reacher books, or they're doing Tom Clancy books, which aren't direct adaptations, but still, nowadays, everybody's doing a book a season. That's the way to do it. Harry Bosch, all these stories that I read, the Michael Connelly stuff, the Lincoln Lawyer. And I've been saying, even on this show in the last 6 years, I said, you know what they're going to start doing? They're going to start taking movies, 2-hour movies, and turning them into 8 and 10 episode shows. P.J. Byrne, who's in True Noir, was just cast in the series version of The Rainmaker. In the same time, we've seen The Lincoln Lawyer become a movie. I mean, it's a TV series. We just saw Presumed Innocent, Scott Turo's book, adapted by David Kelly into a series. Patricia Highsmith, Ripley, another adaptation of The Talented Mr. Ripley. So, back in 2009, I didn't know this. The Joe Ledger books, Joe Ledger joins the Department of Military Science, and each book tells its own story, but then there's a meta-narrative, there's a larger narrative, there's a mythology arc. So the villains continue on, even though some are defeated, some continue on. Situations continue on. So you got individual stories and then a much larger story. And I fucking love these books. I loved it. Now, at the time, I did not know, I want to say around 2010, 2011, CBS purchased the rights and they wanted to do like a serialized CSI show, like a Monster of the Week show, and they actually commissioned a pilot. It never got shot, but the pilot was written. I don't know if I can say who wrote it. A person I know, a friend of mine, wrote it, and I found this out later and sent me that pilot. Now, he's a great writer. This pilot was terrible because of what the mandate was, and they basically adapted a whole book in like an hour-long episode of TV, and it was just terrible. It was god-awful. And it was incredibly disappointing. And so 13 of these books have come out. As a matter of fact, after the 10th book, he ended the series and restarted the series with some of the same characters under the Rogue Team International. So Joe Ledger moved over after the DMS, let's call it, being disbanded. So there's 10 Department of Military Science books that Joe Ledger leads, and then the DMS. It didn't end well for DMS, but Rogue Team International started. So there's been 3 Rogue Team International books, and like all series, it started it petered out, but then with Rogue Team International, Jonathan Mayberry is re-energized, and the 13th book, which was coincidentally called Cave 13, was a banger. And he used to put them out once a year. Now they're kind of coming out once every 18 months. But so, why am I telling you this? Well, it's a dream of mine to have worked, and I could tell you, if somebody were to ask me, if somebody were to bring me in and say, Rob, how would you handle making the Joe Ledger books into a TV series? I could give you the short pitch, the long pitch. I could tell you exactly what they would have to do. I would tell you why we wouldn't start with the first book, Patient Zero, which is a zombie book. There's too many zombie things on TV. You start with book 2, which is The Dragon Factory. Also, you've got better villains in that book. But so I've thought about this. I've been thinking about this now for literally 15 years. Dream of mine to work on this series. Talked about it a lot, tweeted about it a lot. Got to the point where I even tweeted Jonathan Mayberry once sent me a couple of galleys of the books before they came out. They just did a Kickstarter to do a comic, and I pledged, one of the things was I pledged $200, and I was working on True Noir, and I had switched over my debit card, and the debit card wouldn't charge, and I didn't see they'd sent me. I tried to go back and go, no, I've got a new debit card. I flaked. They probably think I flaked on them, but fucked up that Kickstarter. And I tried to do it, and they said, we'll send you a new thing, and they never did. So I couldn't give I wanted to meet Jonathan Mayberry and give him $200 to interview him for an hour or whatever. But didn't do that, so I apologize. I'll still pay you the $200, or what is I pledge, like $300 to get that comic, I promise. But anyway, so wanted to do, I've thought about these books for 15 years. Dream project. Well, as has happened so many times with so many books that were on my shelf that I wanted to make into movies, this happened. John Wicks, Chad Stahelski, to develop Jonathan Mayberry's Joe Ledger novels as a TV series. Now, on one hand, I can think to myself, yeah, for 15 years I've been talking about this, for 15 years. Dreams die quickly. But I can't think of anyone in Hollywood today that is better to do these books than Chad Stahelski. No one. He's doing the Highlander remake. He's the fucking man. The question is, are his development people and the people... Look, this is what happens to projects like this. There's a list of people, like with movies, you want to get a certain list of directors. There's a certain list of approved people that they'll allow to run a television show. And now TV shows are so expensive to make, that pool is very small. The problem is, when you're adapting someone else's material, you hope that you can find somebody like the people that are in charge of Reacher. Clearly, the people that are doing Reacher love Lee Child's books. They figured it out, and they're making really smart decisions. They're not doing the books in order. They're making really smart decisions. Now, you might think that the second season of Reacher was not as good as the first, but they went for that team spirit, and it was an interesting way to go. I thought a great way to go. I enjoyed both seasons of Reacher. Look, I liked the Tom Cruise movies well enough. The problem is Tom Cruise liked those books. As you know, Alan Ritchson is a very different person physically than Tom Cruise is, but Alan Ritchson is the character that Lee Child wrote, and Tom Cruise isn't that character. Although I thought him and Chris McQuarrie did a great job with that first Reacher movie. This is a different animal entirely, because unless you get the balance of the delicious genre goodness that is in Mayberry's books, and you're able to couple it together with the military aspects, the kick-ass action, and unless you can bring about the larger-than-life villains and the tone of it is going to be a really hard needle to thread. But the John Wick franchise is a lot like, in terms of its tone, because the high table and all that, it could have come right out of the Joe Ledger books. Like the high table could have been, those assassins could absolutely have come right out of Jonathan Mayberry's imagination. So even though this is a project that is near and dear to my heart, I think that you couldn't have look, this is not me pitching to work on this show. I've never worked in television like this. That I couldn't, even if somebody wanted to hire me, if I was friends with Chad Stahelski, he couldn't justify me working on a show like this. And I certainly couldn't go in the writer's room because I'm not WGA. So people have to understand that this is not woe is me. It's just, it's not in my wheelhouse. I know how they should do it, but I wouldn't ever be invited to work on a show like this because I've never done it before. You know, the people I know that work in television, they had to work as writer's assistants. There is a pathway, and people have been on it for years, if not decades. I've never been on it. No one's going to let me waltz into a room and tell them what they should and shouldn't write. It just doesn't work that way. The problem is, in my career, I've never had the kind of success. I've come close a few times to creating a TV series with material. Close, but no cigar. If I had done that, that's been the big frustration of my career, being a fan and being a professional. I've been lucky. If I can't get something professionally going, I'll go do Star Trek The Next Generation documentaries. I went from editing a feature film to going to do Star Trek documentaries for 3 years. Steady paycheck, and I got to work on Star Trek. But does it help my perception of getting a project off the ground in Hollywood doing that? No. I went from making free enterprise that made no money, and I spent a year of my life going to what I call Evian meetings, trying to get movies off the ground. I got one movie very, 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 very close. Didn't happen. I've told that story before. And then I went to work on DVD special features. I worked on X-Men. I worked on Superman. I worked on Narnia. I worked on Lord of the Rings. I worked on Tron. Dream job for me. It doesn't help me raise my profile in Hollywood, but I still had a great time, and I got paid. At some points, I got paid a lot of money. So I had a really good time. Now, does it help my perception in the Hollywood sphere to get money to make a movie? No. But I did have a really good time. And that's been the difference in my career. On one hand, I've never set the world on fire with any of the work that I've wanted to do because I've never got there. Will True Noir help my perception in Hollywood? Probably not. Even though if I had the career, if I was able to make a movie with all the cast that I've cast in True Noir, probably be a big movie. Probably get a lot of attention. If True Noir was a movie with my same cast, I would get a lot of attention, which is the ironic thing about it. Still directing all those actors, but still, that's how the world works. Those are choices you make. On one hand, I was having fun being a fanboy, going to New Zealand, hanging out on the set of X2, being on Lord of the Rings in New Zealand, watching Mr. Tumnus, James McAvoy come out on that awesome set. They excavated an equestrian facility down so they could build Narnia and the lamp post. It was amazing. So I've had so much fun. I have no regrets. No regrets. Because I've done it my way. You know, I'm still doing it. I'm still having fun. But let me read this article. This is the thing, is that my dream to make this at some point has died. But now I get to look at somebody who's got control of this property and go, well, then, they've already created the John Wick franchise. And I'm like, all right, fuck yeah. So Nelly Andriva wrote this, and this was in August 29th on Deadline, exclusive to Deadline. And by the way, I got to give it up for Deadline because they so these are the Joe Ledger books, and they pretty much have them in order, I think. Well, not quite. They've got some that are covered up, but it looks like they put them all in order. And kudos to them for doing that. So somebody earned their keep, or maybe they stole that picture. I don't know, but nicely done. So exclusive. Chad Stahelski, director of the John Wick franchise, has acquired rights to the best-selling author Jonathan Mayberry's Joe Ledger book series through his 8711 entertainment production company to develop for television. Published by St. Martin's Griffin, a Macmillan imprint, the Joe Ledger thriller series consists of 10 novels and various offshoots. Its protagonist, Joe Ledger, is a psychologically fractured Baltimore detective secretly recruited by the government to lead a new task force called the Department of Military Sciences to face off against terrorists using bleeding-edge science weapons. Along with his combat dog Ghost, his team of Tier 1 special operators, and the resources of the mysterious Mr. Church, who may be an immortal or a vampire, we don't know. Joe faces off against the threats no other team is able to stop. I love in this article, though, they're shying away from what threats those are. UFOs, AI, mutated people, zombies, aliens, maybe Cthulhu. I mean, it's so funny that they won't even delve into what the books have in them, which makes them delicious and good. I really love reading the Joe Ledger series. It's an all-time epic action series with intrigue, suspense, and such engaging characters, Stahelski said. And as I read it, I could see the immediate cinematic potential. I'm excited to be working with Jonathan to turn it into a TV series. I hope Jonathan Mayberry is retained and they listen to him. Stahelski was known for his stunt work on the Matrix franchise and the original The Crow before he transitioned to directing with John Wick. He's directed all 4 chapters in the hit core franchise, along with producing the most recent one. Chad's career, both behind and in front of the camera, pretty much defines all kinds of things I love to watch. The Matrix, The Crow, John Wick, and many others are solidly in my wheelhouse, and we're both lifelong martial artists as well as professional pop culture geeks, Mayberry said. When we sat down for the first time to discuss Joe Ledger, it was clear that he not only read the books, but deeply and empathically understood the characters. I don't think I've ever met someone in Hollywood whose mind runs along tracks this similar to my own. He's also a visionary and a hell of a lot of fun. This is what they mean when they talk about Hollywood magic. Stahelski's 8711 Entertainment produced the Netflix vampire thriller film Day Shift, starring Jamie Foxx, Dave Franco, and Carla Souza. The company has in the works the Highlander remake for Lionsgate with Henry Cavill, Ghosts of Tsushima, Sony PlayStation based on the action-adventure game set in feudal Japan, Rainbow Six based on the Tom Clancy novel and starring Michael B. Jordan, an adaptation of the popular Black Samurai novels, an adaptation of Trevanian Shibumi, and Man from Nowhere. All of these things are great. Everything they have, I couldn't think of a better company and better people to make this book series into a TV series. In TV, 7-Eleven is developing the John Wick 4 sequel series Under the High Table for Lionsgate, as well as Project Nemesis and the Horvath Project, both for Sony Pictures Television. Stahelski is repped by William Morris Entertainment. Mayberry is a 5-time Bram Stoker Award winner, 4-time Scribe Award winner, Inkpot Award winner, comic book writer, and producer. His comics influenced a large chunk of Black Panther Wakanda Forever, and his vampire novels were adapted into the Netflix series V-Wars. He's repped by Sarah Crow Literary, CAA, and Hirsch Wallerstein, Hayam, Matloff, and Fishman. So, as my dream dies, I get to see Hollywood realize a dream, because hopefully one of my favorite book series is going to get turned into people that are the most capable people in Hollywood to make this. I can't think of better people to make this than Chad Stahelski, especially if he directs the pilot. If I could offer one thing, start with the Dragon Factory. Don't start with Patient Zero. I know. Just zombies, man. That'll do you in. The Dragon Factory, those villains are better. Just saying. But anyway, the point that I was trying to make is that the one thing that as a fan, I can want to do things, but I've never earned the right, the clout, whatever you need to get these kinds of things off the ground. This is an expensive show. This is, if they're going to spend, and by the way, it should be a 10-episode season, not an 8-episode season, but if they're spending $180 million on The Acolyte, where'd that money go? I don't know. This is a show that the look of the John Wick movies, the actual look, the actual quality of how the John Wick movies look that Chad's directed, that's how a Joe Ledger series should look. They've nailed it. It's all going to be about casting, design, and they've got the look. So I can get pissed but I never look. It was never in the cards for me to get to do that. But I get to watch I can actually, as everyone else, the Alex Kurtzmans who take over Star Trek and the people that take over Rings of Power, and I can be like, and the people that take over Star Wars, I'm like, God damn it. How do these people get these projects? I can look at this, one of my favorite book series, and go, fuck yeah. The best person in Hollywood to take over this series, to make it, got it. So I have something that, from a fan's perspective, I can be really excited about. And by the way, I don't know any of these people. I don't know Chad Stahelski. I've never met him. I don't. I've never met Jonathan Mayberry, although he sent me a few books. I was hoping to meet him. By the way, I'd love to get that comic, so if anyone will take my money to support that Kickstarter. I tried. I didn't realize it. They sent me my debit card. I got a new debit card, which is a bummer. But so this is the thing. This is what happens, in a career. I get to be making True Noir with Max Allan Collins. So there's a trade-off. I get to do something I'm very excited about, that I love, that I think is one of the best things I've ever done. I have an incredible script by an incredible writer, who, by the way, it was just announced that Max Allan Collins has a passion project, The Return of the Maltese Falcon. He's been tracking when the original novel went into the public domain. He made a deal with Titan Books and Hard Case Crime, and he's got Return of the Maltese Falcon coming out. So I get to work with a man who's also realizing his own dream. And we get to work together on his book, True Detective, that we are adapting as True Noir. The Assassination of Anton Cermak. So everything comes out in the wash. I get to be enthusiastic. I get to be making my own project with an incredible author. And I get to see another author, one of my favorite book series, also get adapted. So I get to be a professional and a raving fanboy at the same time, which has been my entire experience in Hollywood. So, there you go. So I would say that at the end of the day, it all comes out in the wash, if you love stuff. Now, let me see. I know you guys are, a lot of people are firing in questions. Let's see what you are saying. Let's see if people are saying anything at all. Wow, there's a lot of people saying things. Sidhu has been a member of this channel for 7 months. Sidhu said, I watched Land of Bad and loved it. Basically a Ghost Recon movie. I loved Land of Bad. Land of Bad was so good. I talked about Dahlia on Twitter, who has this great physical media collection. She loved it. The only reason I tuned in was because she had said she loved it. I watched it. I thought it was great. I told Dieter to watch it. He bought the disc. Land of Bad was great for what it is. What's great is Land of Bad promised you something, and it delivers on the promise. And it's got Russell Crowe in it. How often do you get that? So Sidhu said, watch Land of Bad, loved it. Basically a Ghost Recon movie. Started Rosemary's Baby and loving it. I see its influence on Ari Aster's work. I love you, Rob. Well, Sidhu, I love you too. Hopefully I'll see you at the... how could you stop watching Rosemary's Baby in the middle? By the way, somebody on Let's Get Physical Media, I talked about objecting to Room 7A, the Rosemary's Baby prequel that's going to be on Hulu with Julia Garner and with Diane Wiest playing the Ruth Gordon part. Here's why I object to that. Because that movie negates. If you've never seen Rosemary's Baby before, I don't want to spoil it for you, but the paranoia of what's going on, what's real, what's not, is at the core, at the heart of Rosemary's Baby. And by making a prequel to it, it's ruined. Anybody who's going to watch Rosemary's Baby after watching that prequel, they already know what's going on. And that's what I object to. It's not like, oh, I don't object to anything new and this and anything. No. There are things our culture, people should just leave the fuck alone. And Rosemary's Baby is one of those things. Now, I know there was a terrible TV movie, Whatever Happened to Rosemary's Baby. But by making that sequel, you have negated one of the great horror films ever made. One of my top 10 horror movies of all time. Rosemary's Baby is right near the top. And one of my favorite things in Rosemary's Baby is the piece of paper they find that says, I can no longer associate myself. I don't need to know the story of the girl who typed that. But now I'm going to find it and see it. And the movie might indeed be good. The cast is great. Cast is great. Why'd that movie need to be made? Because it damages Rosemary's Baby, if you look at it that way. But nobody cares enough about movies anymore, so who cares, right? I care. Do you think a princess and a guy like me? No. Marco Esquindola says, Campia won't help. Albor's user contacts like Drinker or Gary Call EVS if you must. Let's fucking go. Well, see, you don't understand. I have lots of great contacts. I do. But I've never done anything that warrants me getting hired on a show like that. That's what I'm telling you. If Chad Stahelski was my best friend, he couldn't call me up and give me a job on the show. I've never done anything to warrant working on that, because you have to explain why are people working on a show. People thought that I was shilling for Star Trek Picard season 3 because I wanted to get close to Terry to work on Star Trek. I didn't call Terry. I didn't even know him. We knew each other vaguely, but the same thing is true of him. You can't hire me to go to work on a show. I've never worked in TV. I've directed 5 episodes of a Skinamax show that's of questionable quality. It's fun to make, though. So I don't. There's no one I can call up to go work on the show. What would I do? I mean, if maybe I could direct an episode, that's something I could do. But even then, I'm not you couldn't look at my directing work. Chad Stahelski, that guy's a director. I mean, he's worked. You got to be an action director. I've not done that. It's not my skill set. I've never worked up to that level. I wouldn't hire me to work on the show. I wouldn't. And I'm not just saying that. Marco says, talk to Chris Gore. Major Chai Chai says, I spent 20 years in the Air Force and retired as a major. So you are Major Chai Chai. About 10 years ago, Chai Chai was one of my call signs. Now I didn't realize that. I can't just make fun of you. I don't make fun of you, but Major Chai Chai, you're a real major. D's Webos has been a member for 22 months. You write good letters, too. Should have known. I think you probably told me that. But Norwegian Kryptonian asks, is the Post-Geek Singularity site closed? No, we've been revamping it. I wish that Mike would get on that and set it back up, but we will put it back up. If you want to write me a letter, you can. rmburnett1701@gmail.com. Send me a letter there directly. It's the same thing if you want to leave a tip on the channel. So that's my PayPal too. That's how you find me. The Robo Producer says, yo, Rob, happy Friday. Go see Beetlejuice. Great follow-up. Silly, creepy, and Keaton still has it. And that Elfman score. Yeah, I'm looking forward to seeing it. I've heard mixed things. But when has mixed things ever stopped anybody from going to see a movie? It has not. And we got to get together. I really like your idea. We're gonna stream soon. Romy Forever. It just became a member of the PGS. Well, Romy Forever tomorrow, 11 o'clock Pacific time. Join the member chat. It's in the community tab. Check it out. Marco Esquindolas with a $50 super chat. You are so generous. That's a great consolation prize for not working on the Joe Ledger TV series. I really, really mean that. Thank you. I was born May 25th. I'm old enough. I don't remember Star Wars, but I remember Raiders, Empire, E.T., and my finest hour, Return of the Jedi. My dad took me and a few friends to see Return of the Jedi. The crowd was very enthusiastic. I know it's not your favorite, but it was a magical moment for me, and it should be. Anytime somebody goes to see a James Bond movie in the theater, my first James Bond movie in the theater was Spy Who Loved Me, and it was fucking magical, let me tell you. First time I went and saw a Planet of the Apes movie, Go Ape Festival, it was magical. I'd seen Planet of the Apes already, but, when you see these movies in the theater, it's magical. It's absolutely magical. And it changes your life. Brian Osborne says, why do you suppose there haven't been more directors like Tim Burton that have a distinct look to their films where, regardless of quality, the audience knows whose film it is? Well, I would say that there are. I think like David Fincher, Spielberg, I think, but the problem is, the thing about Tim Burton was an animator. He has the soul of an animator, and he brings that sensibility to his work, and he works with people like Rick Heinrichs and Danny Elfman, and like A Nightmare Before Christmas came right out of his imagination and his animation work. But especially nowadays, honestly, I think that the business is such now that it does not foster those kinds of directors anymore. Individuality. It used to be, I was thinking about this. When I was growing up, I always told people I wanted to be a cross between David Cronenberg, John Carpenter, and Stanley Kubrick when I was a kid. But when you think about a guy like John Carpenter, he makes Dark Star as a student film in film school at USC. Then they come on, they give him money, he expands it into his first feature. So Dark Star becomes a feature film. Then his next movie, his first feature was Assault on Precinct 13, which was, but he shot it in Panavision. It was made for like $300,000. Great movie, by the way. You can tell he's just getting used to the widescreen frame. But his next movie was Halloween, huge hit, but still made for less than $1 million. Then he makes The Fog. Then he makes Escape from New York. He's got a pretty great track record, one of the great indie horror directors. Then he makes The Thing, which is, people would say, is his masterpiece, but it bombed in the summer of 1982. And his career from then, he was struggling. He went on, and after he made Christine in 83, he did Starman in 84, which some people could also say is one of his best movies. Then he went on and did Big Trouble in Little China, another big budget movie that didn't do well. It was way before its time. Again, cult film people love. And then in 87, he makes a deal with Alive Films, and he goes and he was supposed to make 3 movies for Alive, and he makes Prince of Darkness and They Live. Both of those were like $3 million movies. Imagine you're John Carpenter. You get big studio gigs, and then it doesn't entirely work out. I mean, I look at him, and I love John Carpenter, and yeah, it's his latter career is a little bit hit and miss, but still. By the way, somebody wants to remake something, big budget. John Stakely's book Vampires. The movie that John Carpenter made is like the bargain basement version of that book. There's a book. That book was on my shelf. Actually, John Stakely wrote 2 books. He wrote a science fiction book called Armor, that's kind of like Starship Troopers, and Vampires. I was so excited when John Carpenter was going to make Vampires, but it's kind of a bummer. I mean, the movie's okay, but he should have. That movie needed a $100 million budget. So if you want to remake something, Hollywood, go remake Vampires. Go get the book and go make that book. That book is, again, like the Joe Ledger novels, John Stakely's Vampires. If you've seen the movie, don't read that book. That book is fucking wildly entertaining, and that's what I'm talking about. You find these like diamonds in the rough. I have a lot of them. You want to come talk to me about books? I can give them to you all day long. And books that they've been trying to make into movies, like Ken Grimwood's Replay. How many people have written scripts for that book? If you haven't ever read Ken Grimwood's Replay and you like time travel stories, things like that, don't read anything about it. Don't look it up. Don't go to Goodreads. Don't go to Amazon. Just go buy Ken Grimwood's Replay and read it. I guarantee you, 10 pages in, you'll be fucking locked in. And they've been trying to make that book into a movie. They can't do it. It's for various reasons. And structurally, it's a really hard story to crack. But go get that book and read it. Go get that and John Stakely's Vampires. And while you're at it, go get Peter Watt's Blind Sight, another book that should get made into a movie. Why make Fede Alvarez? Why did you make Alien Romulus when you could have made Blind Sight? I know why. Because Blind Sight is an unknown property. It's a book. Nobody wants to spend the time adapting books anymore. Just go make another Alien movie, right? Am I right? That's a real problem now. It really is. Austrian History says, Rob, do you also see a talent difference in the career of Mr. Clive Barker pre and post Nightbreed, like that of The Hellbound Heart versus Galilee? Boy, that's a really good question. Look, I'm still waiting to make the Damnation game into a movie. That was definitely one I wanted to make into a movie. Clive Barker's career has been really interesting. I think that Clive Barker's look, he's directed 3 movies. You know, he directed Hellraiser, which I loved. He directed Nightbreed, which is a mess. And he directed the Harry D'Amour movie, Lord of Illusions, which is okay, but it wasn't as good as I hoped it would be. I think that Clive Barker might have been a victim of his own success, you know, and his private life kind of, I think, maybe interfered with his professional life. But look, again, for those of you, if you liked horror fiction in the 80s, when Stephen King started talking about, I think it was in the Pages of Fangoria, when he first started talking about the Books of Blood, the 6 Books of Blood, man, I had to have them. I had to go get those first edition British, all 6 of them. the books of blood were fucking mind-blowing. Mind-blowing. If you were a horror fiction fan, it's hard to explain. It's interesting you brought up Clive Barker, because it's hard to explain just how good and how fucked up and out there. Like Clive Barker's imagination, he talk about pushing taboos and boundaries and all. I mean, the woke brigade, reading those books, I mean, there's a lot of obviously gay-themed stories in the hills, the cities. That's a fucked up story. I would love to see that. Why isn't somebody... Man, I would love to see that adapted. If you guys have not read the Books of Blood, I mean, a lot of them have been made into, like, you know, Rawhead Rex or whatever. The Midnight Meat Train. The Midnight Meat Train I actually really, really liked. Have you ever seen that with Bradley Cooper? If you guys haven't seen the Midnight Meat Train, it's not perfect, but it's pretty fucking good. I mean, in terms of a Clive Barker adaptation, it got that. And is it Kitamura? Did Kitamura direct that? The Japanese director. Correct me if I'm wrong. Get the Midnight Meat Train. Pretty good. And in terms of books of blood adaptation, but I can't tell you what it was like to get those. You know, when you hear something was good, you know, Stephen King said it was good, and then I got it. Mind fucking blowing. The reading those books, and not all the books of blood were novellas, 6 novellas. Everyone is a book of blood. Whenever we're opened, we're read. I love that so much. But if you love horror fiction and you want to read something that's it pushes the boundaries, man. The books of blood push the fucking boundaries. But yeah, I don't know if Clive Barker was a victim of his own success so much as, you know, maybe he was. I don't really know. I did interview him once in his house for something that didn't happen with Chronicles of Narnia. You know, an idea I had that we were given the budget for that I never got to see finished because Disney killed the project that we were working on for no reason that we were doing. But I did go to Clive Barker's house and interviewed him. He actually has 2 houses, one next to each other, and into his gallery where he paints. It was amazing. It was an incredible interview. Austrian history, that was your first super chat on this channel, so I want to thank you for that. But yeah, I mean that's a really great. I don't think it was. You know what? You're asking about Nightbreed. I don't think it was that. I think it was external forces, and I also think that the problem with Nightbreed is it is all over the place, but also it really needed. Was it Bob Keane who did the effects? I don't mean to put him down, but I just felt that Nightbreed needed more technology to be fully realized. It just I don't know. Galilee, I love that you brought that up. I read all of Clive Barker's books. I mean, he never wrote the 3rd book of the art. Why didn't he write the 3rd book of the art? And it's a tragedy when the Hellraiser Harry D'Amour team-up book. There's a story there. I won't get into it, but what a bummer. Thomas Logan says, how you doing, Thomas? Rob, I don't agree that you wouldn't be allowed in the writer's room. Showrunners decide who's in that room, and if they want you to be there, you'll be there. No. Honestly, that isn't true. The Writers Guild of America controls a lot of that. And WGA writers and what goes on in a writer's room is regulated. Not anybody can just go into a writer's room. Look, all I could offer is how I think the show should be made. And I already threw it out there. You can't do Patient Zero first. You got to take the origin stuff that's in Patient Zero and put it into the Dragon Factory. Because once you've got people, and the Dragon Factory is the 2nd Ledger book. That's the book you start with. Because it's also got great villains. And you know what's really interesting? The Joe Ledger books, in a way, Hannibal, like if I were to look at something, it would kind of be John Wick meets Brian Fuller's Hannibal meets John Wick is kind of where you got to go. Kind of. Sometimes it gets much more military. You know, like Cave 13 is very Middle East based, but you've got it's going to be the horror should be horrific, and the sci-fi element should be really. The thing about the Joe Ledger show is the tone is tough to crack. The tone is tough. And when you read the books, first of all, you got that kick-ass John Wick action, and there is a lot of kick-ass action. But it's the science fiction horror stuff that you've got to be, you got to, because that's what'll torpedo the show. And then the reason those books work is because not only do you have the genre goodness, it's the characters. You love those characters. You love Joe Ledger. You love Bunny. Yes, there's a character named Bunny. You love all those characters. Multi-ethnic. It could be fucking great. But I mean, it's a tough one. It is a tough one. Thomas Logan says I should reach out to Chad and offer him my services. But see, that's what I'm trying to tell you. I don't have anything to offer other than, I love those books. That's all I got. I mean, I think I know how to make that show, but I don't have any professional credibility. I really don't. And that's the only reason that, otherwise I would apply. There's nowhere to apply for that job. They've already got a whole development staff to do it. But yeah. Tony Reyes has been a member for 29 months. Thank you, Tony. Kelvin Wellborn for 29 months as well. Thank you. Grendel Prime says, I stepped up to join the members chat. I'd like to riff about Grendel, 80s horror like The Beast Within. The Beast Within. Duran and The Woods Are Dark. It's funny you talk about The Woods Are Dark. That's a book that should get made. Dave Parker and I talk about that a lot. I have a slip-cased small press edition of The Woods Are Dark. I'd love to make The Woods Are Dark. There's a movie that I could probably get made. I'd love to make that movie. Join the members chat. We can talk about Grendel. There's a comic book series. There, by the way, here's the thing about Grendel. I know people have tried to make it. It's Dark Horse, all that. I'm sure Grendel is a tough nut to crack, but you got to start with Devil by the Deed. But the thing about Grendel is you reinvent it just like the comics did. The Christine Spar Grendel after the Hunter Rose Grendel. You could do that. It would work. But again, you need a visionary. You need somebody. The problem. Here's another problem. Trying to convince people that have money that you can make these shows, they don't know what the fuck you're talking about. Even if you give somebody, it comes down to the people that you're trying to convince that you want to make these things. See, the thing about Chad Stahelski is he's got the professional clout. The John Wick franchise and all the work he's done has made him a hot commodity. When you're a hot commodity, you get to leapfrog over the people that tell you whether you can or can't do something. You bring stuff to them, and even the people like Chad Stahelski, I'm sure he's taken things that people said, no, we're not going to make this. The people now at the gatekeepers that decide what can and can't get made or whatever, they know less than they've ever known. They don't read. They don't even watch movies. They don't even know. They want to know what the elements are, and it's incredibly frustrating to be passionate. I'd love to see Grendel get made. And indeed, people have been trying to make Grendel. That's another project that has so many people have taken a crack at it, like the remake of Logan's Run. Between people like Bryan Singer and Nicholas Winding Refn, I mean, how many people have gone in and out of the door to make Logan's Run? I mean, how many people? You could write a whole book about aborted attempts to make Logan's Run. I mean, Bryan Singer practically previous his entire version that Chris McQuarrie wrote. Kid you not. But they don't get made because the people that you have to go through don't know what you're talking about. You walk into these meetings, if you walked in and tried to explain the Grendel comic to somebody, they'd be like, "What?" I mean, it's crazy. Unless you have that clout. Unless you have the clout, that's what people need. So, Sonny Dominguez comes to us. The King of Squirting says, at the encouragement of an established Chicana writer whose play was turned into a movie, I submitted to a short play festival. The next play is Tribal, about a group of friends who have a tense disagreement about woke entertainment, politics, and wrestling. I'd watch that. Good luck, man. Keep us informed. Tax says, seems a recurring theme in everything from comics, movies, TV, and music is that people will let their egos get in the way and ruin $1 million operation over pettiness and greed. The guys in the industry that know to look 3 steps ahead are rare and amazing. Tack, you are 100% correct. And it's unfortunate. But what can you do? I mean, the industry works how it works. And another big problem is how expensive everything has become. To make these things, to do a Joe Ledger TV show 20 years ago, you could still do it for a price. Now you're probably looking at, with Chad Stahelski, $30 million an episode for a TV show. But he could get that. He could get that. If they're doing 30-minute episodes of The Acolyte for $180 million, and look at like The Citadel. Look at what Netflix and look at what these people are paying for TV shows. If you did the Joe Ledger show correctly, it'd be a fan favorite. And you could do all those books. Although you've got 13 books to choose from, you could get 8 seasons out of it. Because there's some books you don't necessarily have to do. Like maybe Dogs of War, you don't have to do that. Predator 1, maybe not. I don't know. Depends. Tom Jr. Jackson says we need to stream together sometime. We really do. It's been too long. We will, Tom, because you're a goof. You're a goof person, and so am I. Michael Patowski. Is it Patowski? Is that right? Hey, Rob, I got the Frighteners 4K from Turbine. Great transfer. I love movies, but how good was it seeing The Crow bomb at the box office? I have to tell you, I think it was misguided to make that movie. They've been trying to make it for so long, they probably had to because money had been spent. But the real question is why? You could have made. I'll tell you. Here's a book. Here's another book. You want to read another book? You want to read another great genre book that is owned? I don't know if they bought it outright, but it's owned by RSA. So it's owned by Ridley Scott's company. Glenn Duncan's The Last Werewolf. I mean, I just saw the trailer for the teaser for The Wolfman. When I read The Last Werewolf, another one of those, Glenn Duncan wrote a book called I, Lucifer that Dan Harris told me about. He was going to adapt it. When I read The Last Werewolf, I'm like, let's go make this fucking movie. Looked into the rights. They were bought. Where's that book? Where's the movie? They've owned it for 10 years or something? Taken off the market. Instead of making The Crow, go make The Last Werewolf. There's 3 of those books, too. There wasn't when I read it, but there's 3 now. I mean, why not? Of course, I don't know if somebody wrote a script. Script might not have been good. That's the problem. They hire some generic writer that doesn't make a passion project and disappears. But you guys should read it. Glenn Duncan's The Last Werewolf. If you like horror, go check that out. It's a lot of fun to read. I'm not saying it's the greatest book in the world, but as a genre book, if you like reading B horror novels that are elevated to A-list, you can do a lot worse than The Last Werewolf. And the Tallulah Rising, and they're good. You'll like them. Go read them. It was good. Can't have my copy though. So that what else? What else is going on? Let's see. I haven't got down to the list yet. Roger Polson sends in a super sticker, $5 super sticker, and says, "Keep it up." Well, that's what she said. I try. But Real Deal with Real Deal, is that Tom Conkle? I can't tell. I can only see Real Deal with Tom K. Real Deal says, an artist's greatest masterpiece is not the story they tell, but the courage to keep believing in it when the world remains silent. Yeah, I can see that, but it's still a painful reality. We still want to tell our stories. Wind Goddess has been a member of this channel, but I understand. That's what I could do. You got to keep going. You can't give up. It's not like a Kate Bush platitude when she's singing with Peter Gabriel. Don't give up because you have friends. No, don't ever give up. You got to get your project finished. Let's see. Wind Goddess has been a member for 46 months. I said that. Thomas Logan says, check her email, Bobby. If this doomsday leak is true, It totally justifies Robert Downey Jr.'s casting and would have a seismic effect on Tony Stark's MCU legacy. Well, that's what I've heard, but I can't share that on this show. I can't share that on this show right now. I've got to go check it out, and then I'd get in trouble. The Dead Man says, Rob, happy birthday. Happy birthday the day Chris Gore. Is it Chris Gore's birthday? Is that actually his real birthday? Okay, now I'm curious, Thomas. I've got to go check my email. I'm checking my email now. And apparently Thomas wants me to see if what this leak is. Oh, it's on Reddit, dude. Reddit. Let's see. I'm reading this thing. No, you know what? I don't know about that. I'm not going to share this. I don't know if I believe this. I don't know. I'm not going to buy into this. I don't like this. I'd have to contemplate this. We shall see. We shall see. Well, I don't like the switched at birth angle. I just don't. And on that note, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, gentle beings, kind souls, this is kind of a rambling show, but it was a lot of fun. And there's a lot of people that are watching tonight, so I want to thank you. I always wonder, what do people think when I'm rambling like this, when I don't actually have a specific entertainment topic? But I would implore all of you, if you love genre fiction, and if you love the X-Files, if you love Tom Clancy, if you like the taking horror tropes and seeing them made more realistic, grounded, and you like military hardware and all that, seek out the Joe Ledger novels. Now, I know the first book is about a zombie, but you got to read the books in order. It's not about a zombie. It's about a disease, a pathogen. It has a great name too that I'll let you discover. But read the first Joe Ledger book, Patient Zero. It's a banger. Jonathan Mayberry. Get it, read it, and if you love it, get back to me. And I'm telling you, the series of books is a lot of fun. I think you're going to really dig them. And Chad Stahelski doing them as a TV series. Can't wait. And you know what? Some of the books in the middle, are better than others. But when you get to Rogue Team International, lots of shenanigans happening in those books too. And Cave 13 was a great, great, great Joe Ledger book. And it was the last one that came out. So check those out. Read them. Get back to me. Read any of those books. Read Blind Sight. By the way, The Dead Man, that was a $20 super chat you sent me. But yeah, so great stuff. And on that note, I want to thank Tom Jr. Jackson for being a goof person and being a great moderator. I want to thank all of you for helping me on this channel through super chats, through tips, through all your support, memberships, and all that. And I implore you, if you really want to help me out, we got $6,000 that we need on our Kickstarter for True Noir. You can go back to the beginning of this show and you can hear our unnamed Nathan Heller. He has not been announced yet, but you can hear him. And look for a final cast list to be released someday soon, and you can see everybody who's in it because it is a murderer's row of actors you've known and loved. So go to Kickstarter, go to truenoir.co, and help us make True Noir a reality. It's going to become a reality anyway, but you can basically pre-buy the series, and hopefully we will be at New York Comic Con with a great panel and other things that we're trying to arrange. So it's not confirmed yet, but it's getting there. So come see us. And on that note, remember, every person you meet has a story to tell that you have yet to hear. And all you have to do is listen. And with that, I say to all of you, go to Kickstarter. Go support True Noir. truenoir.co. Like Major Chai Chai did in a big way. Thank you so much for that. And for you members, join us tomorrow at 11 a.m. for the member chat. It's going to be a lot of fun. And go read Joe Ledger books. And The Last Werewolf. And Blind Sight. And a book called The World on Blood by Jonathan Nassau. Another book I would love to make into a movie. The World on Blood. What a great title. The World on Blood by Jonathan Nassau. It'd be great. Alas, poor Yorick